Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can everyone hear me okay?
Great.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Johnny Kay. I'm the news director at Mayoral Radio. I do the morning show on Q96. I want to thank everybody sincerely for joining us tonight. This will be the first of at least 3 candidate forums brought to us locally by the Sweetwater County Library. Next Monday night, we'll be right back here with at least 5 of our 6 candidates for the Sweetwater County Sheriff's Office. Next Thursday, we'll be in Green River for the candidates for the Green River Mayor. Tonight, of course, we're focused on our 3 candidates for the county attorney. And I'd like to call your attention to the candidates this time. Daniel Mosby, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Rob Hyatt and Bob Reese. Good evening to you both, gentlemen. Also our panelists this evening, Ms. Carla Leach, good evening, ma'am, and Deb Sutton. Thank you both for being here this evening. Now our panelists have prepared questions that hopefully will cover some of the things at least that you've got in your mind. Our friends also from SweetwaterNow.com, Carlo Harriman in the back corner. Carlo, thank you for joining us this evening. SweetwaterNow.com has brought us questions as well, not provided necessarily by them, but actually provided by the online readers of SweetwaterNow.com. Now in the back here, we've got our signal caller. Now, if I...
In Richmond, they had it where they figured out the 50 young people that were most likely to kill or be killed, and they were able to do that because they had the statistics. They approached them on the street and they started working with them, and they dramatically turned it around. There are programs out there that we can look at and use to try to change things and get these kids into, say, Western Wyoming.
All right, very good, sir.
I've still got more time. One of the things that is obvious to me, and I think to everybody, is again the substance abuse that I've talked about. If we work on that and try to work on stopping drug and alcohol problems at their root, I know that I suspect that we have already lost the war on drugs, but there ought to be other ways to deal with that. Just as there's other programs for young children, there's other programs for substance abuse.
All right, we'll begin the next series of questions being answered by Robert Hyatt. Ma'am?
Thank you. Gentlemen, this is a 2-part question. Follow along. Do you believe a plea bargain where the accused is willing to plead guilty in exchange for probation or a shorter jail or prison term is equitable to the accused and to his or her victims? In that vein, in what instances is it appropriate to accept a plea bargain when it involves possible dismissal of 1 or more charges?
Who asked that question?
That's from the Rocket Miner.
We can blame them. Plea bargaining has always been part of the process. People have a misconception that probation is a sentence. It's not. It's a privilege granted by the sentencing judge. You don't see anybody sentenced to probation. They're sentenced to a specific period of time in prison. They're sentenced to a time in circuit court, or some other connotation of this is hanging over your head if you're not successful on probation. So that's just part of the process. So that part of the question, I think I've explained. You are going to make deals. We go and say, hey, look, this is what we're willing to offer you. This much jail time, and if you want to argue it, your defense counsel wants to argue it to the court, so be it. But this is what we're asking for. And that helps move the process along. Or we have 500 trials in the judge's jury stacks instead of 26 and 19. And I don't need my other 30 seconds. Can we have a part 2 part?
This country has 5% of the world's population and 25% of the prisoners. Criminal justice is not about retribution. There's plenty of cases, court cases, Wyoming Supreme Court cases that say that. It's about rehabilitation and deterrence. So you want to keep other people from doing this when you punish them. But I guess the best way to avoid plea bargaining is to not overcharge. You should charge what the case warrants and vigorously pursue that. On the other hand, there's not enough money to put everybody in prison and to do all the trials. And so one of the responsibilities of the county attorney is to watch the budget and make sure that it's not overspent on and let's face it, these are our own citizens. Making them better citizens, even after they commit a crime, should be a priority. So, plea bargaining has a bad connotation, and it sounds anti-law and order, but what you really want to do is get these citizens back to your community after they've done whatever deterrent effect or rehabilitation effect they had to go through. And that's one of the reasons why I'm focused on substance abuse and doing something about that as a way of trying to get these people out of these problems and make them productive citizens. It may take many years in the penitentiary, it depends. Violent crimes get a lot more. Some of the others need to be worked on.
The question once again surrounded in part sentencing and plea bargains, and a final answer to that, Daniel Aronofsky.
The prosecutor is the first judge on the case. Okay, they have to judge the facts and determine whether or not there's a crime there. Then afterwards, they have to judge the case, determine what kind of sentence they're looking at. And in doing that, they have to they address the strength of their case. They address the concerns, should be addressing the concerns of the victim, should be addressing the docket, and what kind of time frame are we looking at, and the cost of varying things. Those are minor parts in that determination. If you're dealing with a victim in this case, that's your first part of the question addressed, you have to discuss these issues with the victim, and sometimes that victim's going to want the full maximum sentence, but maybe your case isn't that strong. Maybe you don't have the ability to go to court and win on what you actually charge. And I do agree with Bob that sometimes when you overcharge, that kind of plays with the plea bargaining system. And I would want everybody to charge what they first judge on the scene or when they get the report. The second aspect of it is that certain cases do require probation. Not necessarily cases of violence where there's a victim, but cases where there are no victims and we have an underlying substance abuse. Treatment works. Treatment court works. And treatment works better if you're not in jail. Because in jail there's no temptation. There's no alcohol in jail. There's no alcohol in jail. These people come back out, guess what? Now they have to deal with alcohol. And studies have shown that intense supervised probation through a treatment court or other aspects, dealing with that problem in a real world situation reduces recidivism.
All right, thank you, sir. And I believe Daniel.
Me or you?
Daniel, yes, you will be the first person to answer our next series of questions.
This question is from Sweetwater Now. What action, if any, would you take as county attorney if someone in your office posts statements or photos on social media sites about current cases being handled by the prosecutor's office?
Well, that's interesting. I would imagine if these posts, and I don't want to get into the position of micromanaging people's lives and what they can and can't do in their private life, but it all boils down to 3 words: do your job. It really boils down to that. We don't need to bring in a lot of extra drama, extra outworld life experiences into the job of prosecution and doing the simple thing of taking cases and seeing them through. Now, if there are statements being posted or bandied during a case, obviously no. I mean, I don't see that happening. If we are copying and pasting a headline that was in the paper, I don't see a problem with that. But if it becomes an issue where it's affecting jury pools, if it's affecting public opinion of the office, if it's affecting the case itself, then absolutely not. I think it has to be stopped at some point. I think having a social media policy coming into the county attorney's office is a good idea. I think having an electronic, I'm going to say electronic, computer policy coming into the county attorney's office is a good idea. So we're all playing by the same rules. But, we're adults, and the people working in the office are adults, and I don't think we have to get to the point where I'm, following them home and making sure they're doing the right thing on a moral basis. But I do think that there has to be some sort of policy set up to stop any type of malfeasance that way.
All right, Rob Hyatt, any thoughts on social media?
Yes, I know from experience in the county attorney's office that there's a county policy in effect, and I know Brett Johnson has his own policies in effect, and I believe that the people working in the county attorney's office are consummate professionals, that they understand that they have a special standing in the community as a prosecutor or working for the staff. And that because of that, people might tend to look at their opinion in a little more close manner. I believe that everyone has the right under the Constitution to make statements, but when you accept the responsibility of working in the county attorney's office or being a prosecutor for the county attorney's office, you also accept the responsibility that you're going to be strictly scrutinized. And part of that would be, don't be making comments about cases online. Not while you're in the office. It's not necessary. And I'm not saying that that's something to stifle someone's opinion. Quite the opposite. I revel in people's different opinions about things. That's what makes this process great. But that understanding and that commitment to the public is we have to act in the most professional manner at all times. And because we're doing that in the public eye, we have to be careful about what we post online and what we say online, because it can be taken wrong, it can be blown out, it can be reprinted a bunch of times without our consent and taken the wrong way. So the way you avoid that is don't do it in the first place. And I don't believe that's a problem with the current staff. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Finally, back to Bob Reese, use of social media in your office.
Trials are adversary proceedings. If a trial lawyer does not think that somebody's watching all his posts or her posts, they should know it. It's just foolish to talk about any case before, after, or during in the social media. And in the civil arena, we run into this all the time, and it's serious stuff, and we have to counsel our clients to get off that stuff and stay off of it, because if you don't, there are lawyers looking, and most lawyers know to look at what the other side's doing, and it should be advice not just for the attorneys, but for all the litigants to stay out of it, because it's going to come back and bite you.
Okay, very good. We'll begin the next series of questions with Robert Hyatt. I want to remind everybody, if you've got some questions you would like asked this evening, please write them down and find one of the members of the Sweetwater County.
What do you consider the greatest challenge to serving Sweetwater County? And what are 3 actions that you would take or emphasize in this role?
I think there's a lot of things that the county attorney's office is responsible for that the public is totally unaware of. One of the biggest things is what they do as far as juvenile services. And by law, that's a sealed system. So a lot of the efforts that the county attorney's office has put forward to help remedy problems in that area goes unnoticed by the public. A lot of the things that they do in the county attorney's office could be disseminated better to the public. In other words, use your website as the county attorney to say, here are the cases, here are hearings we're going to be doing. If you want to come see us in action, here's where it's going to happen. There are some cases you can't do that with. And those, you just couldn't disseminate that information. But I think we have to be a little more transparent in what we do as prosecutors, so that the public gains a better understanding that we're trying to change behaviors, we're trying to protect the public. But if you don't get involved, you're not going to know. And on this topic, I just got to read this because it fits this question so well. I got out of a fortune cookie, I got a fortune that says a different world cannot be built by different people. And when I pulled that out, it just resonated with me. And I think that's applicable to this situation. We don't have indifferent people now, but things change all the time. And it's up to us to be able to set that standard for these so that we can make a better world.
Thank you. Same question, Bob Reese.
Well, I think the county attorney has to be responsible for his staff, but again, as I said, they need to be treated as professionals. And so, I'm sorry, I forgot the question. I was listening to Rob.
What do you consider the greatest challenges to serving Sweetwater County? And what are 3 actions you would take or emphasize in this role?
The greatest challenge, I think, is to try to do something effective about criminal activity and making sure that it doesn't get out of hand and to make sure that the citizens' rights are protected in the courtroom. That's the greatest challenge. That's what needs to be done. I see myself as participating in trials and helping with trials and being in charge of them if that's where it's supposed to be. Also making sure the staff is as professional and competent as possible and trying to encourage them to reach their own peaks of achievement and become good prosecutors and realize that everybody is here to help the community, and that's what the purpose of the office is. And the community includes everybody in it.
Thank you, Bob. Finally, Daniel Aramosby, what's most important to you if you're elected county attorney?
First, my last fortune cookie, fortune said, "That's not chicken." Anyhow, I agree with Bob. I think the most important aspect, one of the most important aspects of the county attorney's office is in dealing with the victims and those affected by crime and who may not be directly affected. I think coming from a private standpoint, like all of us up here, we've had to deal with people in our office all the time, and nobody's really truly happy when they come and see an attorney. I've learned over the years how to talk with people and empathize with people, and I think that's a leading role of the county attorney. There may be a case one of the prosecutors is doing, and they have to break the news to the victim that, look, we're not going to get the sentence you want, and that victim wants to be heard. And I think that's the role of the county attorney, to step in and be able to talk to that person, be able to feel what they, and explain to them why we're doing what we're doing. It's all about honesty at that time. Honesty is key to life, but to this position, probably more than any other. Because there are ethics that are involved with prosecutors that are above those of a defense attorney that they have to adhere to. And I think that bringing honesty into that role is key. And really quick, the other aspect is that I would try to use the treatment court as far as hardcore impaired drivers are concerned. Hardcore impaired drivers are your 1.5s or higher that have multiple DUIs. Right now, the worst case scenario for a hardcore impaired driver is 6 months jail. But you could be down in your basement playing Nintendo, Xbox, I dated myself, and have some marijuana and you're looking at a year jail. And so we don't have enough to deal with that substance abuse in a hardcore impaired driver. So that's one of the aspects that I would like to turn to if I get this job.
All right, thank you, Counselor. If we could pass the microphone down to Bob Reese, he will begin the first answer and next series of questions.
Gentlemen, this is an easy one. How much time have you actually spent in district or circuit court proceedings?
About 30 years during the day. Maybe, no, 37. But it's been a really rewarding experience, and I think the most necessary quality of being a prosecutor is wisdom. And I think that wisdom comes from learning from your own mistakes. And I've been around long enough that I've learned from a lot more of those than these two have. I think that helps with the wisdom, because a prosecutor's role is partly justice, and well, it's all justice. Mr. Hyatt has it exactly right. It's justice, not politics. And so in doing the justice, you've got to have the experience to be able to do it and make sure that that's what your main interest is and your main concentration is.
Quite a bit of time. When I was the prosecuting back in 96 through 98, I was the only, at one point I was the only prosecutor in Rock Springs. I was in court all the time, and at the same time we had to turn around and go to district court and cover our felonies as well. And I kept my calendar to look back upon how crazy it was. Well, I stopped looking at that calendar because it doesn't get any better. I was a public defender for many years and constantly in court. Our civil practices, and I don't mean to speak for Rob or Bob, but they're very similar in that we are in court quite a bit in district court doing bench trials and doing arraignments, preliminary hearings. So we're familiar with the judges. I'm familiar with the judges. I can't speak for them, but think they would say the same. It's part of the job that I like, is being in court. It's the reason why I went to law school. I didn't realize that there was an actual law practice in an office. I was going off TV. I thought you were in court all the time looking cool, but no, there's actually some really boring stuff out there. So when you get the opportunity to be in court, to be able to work in that fashion, it is enjoyable. If any job can be enjoyable in that field, but it is. And so I feel right at home in court, and I would say that the staff of the county attorney's office, they do very well in court, and I think that I can help in assisting them on their trials and without missing a step.
All right, finally, regarding your time in the court, finally answered, Rob Hyatt.
When I first started off in '98, I used to keep track of the different kinds of cases that I had, just so I could, okay, I've done this many cases, because people would ask, how many of these have you done? When you get into triple digits, you quit doing that. It's meaningless at that point. When I was in the county attorney's office, I was doing the 10 o'clock arraignments almost every day in Judge Schofield's court. Like Danny said, you go right from there right into district court to do something. It might be a sentencing in a sex assault case. I did all the aggravated vehicular homicide cases when I was there that involved alcohol. I did all the DUI prosecutions for the city of Green River. Those were all done in circuit court. I've done juvenile trials. Those are done in district court. We all have experience at every court level in Sweetwater County. One of the other things that I started in '92 when I was in law school. I was here for the summer with the prosecution assistance clinic. And as a law student, you think, well, this is great. I'm going to get to experience things. One of the first things that I got to experience was an autopsy on a 2-year-old child that had been killed in a vehicular homicide case. Never thought I'd do that. And since then, I've been exposed to other ones with alcohol-related vehicular homicides. So it's court experience, and like Bob says, it's experience with everything else. And I think you'll find all three of us have that. It's just, what are we going to do different? And one of us is going to be the new guy come election time. And I would like that to be me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And Deb, I believe this is going to be our final series of questions. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think.
At least from this particular panel.
I just have one final one then. If elected, what are your priorities? And what would you like to accomplish in your first 100 days?
Sir, that is to you, Robert Hyatt Jr.
I've already mentioned it, but I think it's critical that we get some investigators working back in the office. I think it's critical to get everyone working on the same page and reassess how the caseload is being spread amongst the attorneys and make some changes to help them be able to do that better. Part of that is being able to help them get a little more training that's available on the different types of prosecutions that we're seeing now that's kind of changing this area. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more drug cases in the future with the prevalence of heroin now. All the states around us are really having a problem with it. You know, Colorado has legalized marijuana, and that's caused a problem for them with their drug-related DUIs. It's up 36% in Colorado. Utah has seen an enormous rise in heroin issues in every aspect, from driving while under the influence, drug busts, having other crimes associated with it, and Wyoming is located right in the middle of the I-80 drug corridor. So we're going to see that too. So in the first 100 days, I want to make sure I get everybody organized so that we're working towards a common goal. Everybody knows what issues I think we need to change and address and get going on it right away. And I think with my experience of being recently in the office, the first 100 days I could walk right in and step up and get that accomplished.
All right, Bob Reese, your first 100 days.
I believe that if you have a system which has bad policemen, bad judges, bad defense attorneys, and a good prosecutor, the system works. If you have good judges and good defense attorneys and good police officers and a bad prosecutor, the system doesn't work. So the first 100 days, I want to make sure that my staff and I all realized how important the prosecutorial role is in setting the standards of justice in the community and trying to do that. I also have a priority about victims' rights. I was in the state senate when they passed that legislation. I tried to put teeth into it, and I was told that it would never pass if it had any teeth. So right now it's just a feel-good kind of thing. I want to concentrate a lot more on making the victims understand where they are and where they get to go from there, and help victims and as citizens to become better, healing better from it. There's some serious things that happen to a victim of crime, and we're doing a lot more than when I was last prosecutor, but there's a lot more to be done.
All right, final answer to the final question. First 100 days, Daniel Aramosby.
I think realistically, one of the first things that needs to be done is to assess if there's a backlog in any cases. Being that the office is short right now and possibly that we have an uneven caseload, that needs to be assessed, because if that is the case and there are some dockets that are needing to be filled, there are people out there wondering what's going on with their case, and so that has to be addressed, and I think that falls right into victims' rights. Afterwards, I would try to get together with crime victim coordinators and to determine what they feel is missing from the office as far as victims' rights are concerned. These are the people that deal with the victims and the witnesses on a daily basis, and I think they are better prepared to let me know what they think. I would take their advice, because I do think that's paramount, is giving the victims an opportunity to be able to have a say, whether they want prosecution or they want to hammer the guy, but they need to be addressed. And so I would deal primarily for first 100 days, catching the office up, and also talking with the victim coordinators to see how we could better that system. In the long run, I would like to impose my philosophy of violent crime being prosecuted violently. I want violent crime to have severe consequences. That, to me, is where we have victims that are really hurt, but more so, that's where the community is hurt the most. Secondly, I would take hardcore impaired drivers and try to streamline them through a treatment court. I want that third and second DUI not to get a fourth DUI. And I think the best way we can do that is by putting them through a treatment court aspect where they're dealing with severe or intensive supervised probation.
All right, I believe that concludes our questions from our panel. Is that correct, ladies? Thank you so much for submitting those questions to us this evening. We will have closing statements here in just a moment or two from each of our three candidates, but this time we'd like to turn the microphone over to our guests joining us this evening in the Sweetwater County Library. Where is Pam James? Join you, ma'am. Ma'am, you had submitted a question for our candidates. If you could read this aloud to everybody, please.
Okay, my question is, recently there is a lot of violent crimes that are being punished very leniently. What are your thoughts on that?
Is that directed towards anybody in particular?
This is actually, we'll stay in the same round-robin format, and again, 1.5 minutes for each of the candidates to answer that question. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, I think we have to look at why certain punishments came out the way they did. Was there a weakness in the case that made a plea agreement go a certain way? Did we have an investigation that maybe wasn't as strong as we thought it was going to be? The only thing that I can say is that if it is a strong case and there is violence involved and we do have a victim, that it's not going to be lenient. Of course, you have to take into effect, does this defendant have a record? What is his chance? What has probation done in the past if he does have a record? Is there an underlying treatment issue? Has that treatment issue been dealt with before? There's many things that come into play on it. But the way I would approach it, I'd look at the strength of the case. I would determine how strong it is, talk with the victims, talk with the witnesses to determine what kind of sentence I'm going to ask for. As I said before, the prosecutor is the first judge on the case. And the second aspect of judging the facts of the case, determine what you're charging, if you're charging anything, is determine what the sentence is going to be. And at that point, that's what you're going to the judge with. The judge has to be reactionary to that. I know sometimes it doesn't work out the way the prosecution wants, and you make an argued sentencing and you don't get what you want out of it, but you have to go in there honestly and responsibly with the idea that this is what I feel this case is worth.
All right, right, thank you. Same question, Robert Hyatt.
Sentencing is always the purview of the judge that's hearing the matter. What we do as prosecutors is we have the ability to help the victim understand that process and to be able to promote what the victim thinks would be just. We do that by arguing for a specific sentence in a specific case. That doesn't always get ordered by the judge. But by being open and letting the victims of these violent crimes know from day one, this is what the facts give us. This is how the process will work. They will be informed throughout the process, from the time they have initial contact with that law enforcement officer to the time they're actually in court, if they need to appear, to the time that they're there for the sentencing. If that is monitored and followed up on, there shouldn't be any surprises for that victim, but we can't always control the outcome. We can only advocate for what we think is fair and just in that situation. And I will always try to do that. I think part of that process is helping the victim understand what is possible given what our current state of the law is, and what is possible in this particular case. So that we don't lead you down the path as a victim thinking when we get to that end, everybody's going to get a 25-year sentence. We need to be honest with you. We think this is what would happen here. What are your thoughts? How can we help you get past this? Is there something else we could do for you? And that's what we can do. Thank you.
All right, final answer once again, Bob Reese.
Well, I think violent crimes ought to have a priority, and I kind of disagree with Rob that the prosecutors don't have much to say, because the prosecutors do. We make deals with defense attorneys all the time, and we can make them lower, we can make them high. And with violent crimes, I think that the emphasis should be on higher sentences, simply because most of them under studies are shown to be violent again, and they're real hard to cure. So my emphasis would be on treating violent crimes as the most serious. And I include sexual assault as a serious crime because it puts in the extreme of every negative emotion, from disgust to fear to hatred to revulsion, helplessness, anger, and vengeance. And that's something that has to be stopped. And if it's not worked on, we could end up like India or some of those places. It's always something that has to be looked out for. And some of the communities across this state I see that aren't doing nearly enough, but I think we're doing that in Sweetwater County, and we need to keep it up, because those kind of violent crimes have long time serious consequences, and they're repetitive.
All right, thank you. Once again, taking questions from the audience. And where is Tammy at? Is it Tammy? Do I have it? Okay, ma'am, I'm coming your way. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got a question you'd like to be submitted for consideration tonight, please feel free to jot it down and submit it to one of the members of the Sweetwater County Library. Let me get back to Miss Tammy right quick. And ma'am, if you wouldn't mind reading your question aloud.
How would you exercise due diligence in verifying a case to prevent quota-based prosecution?
When we get a report from police officers, from whatever, it's Rock Springs PD, Green River, the Highway Patrol, the Sheriff's Department, that's what starts the process. I don't believe you ever prioritize quotas. We want to do so many of these kind, we want to do so many of those kind. We take this work as it comes to us. It's then our responsibility as a prosecutor and in the prosecutor's office that once we get that information, we see what the facts were the officer saw, what the officer thought should happen, and then we have the ability to take it from there to a successful prosecution. The facts have to meet the charge that we put forward. We have to be prepared to go forward and prosecute that case. Not just get someone arrested and then let's figure the case out in 6 months and see where we wind up, or let's charge everything we can think of like it's a law school exam and we'll see where the jury winds up. It's our responsibility to take that initial information and be responsible for it. And if we don't have the tools to track that in a responsible manner, then that's on me as county attorney to provide that for my staff and to provide that leadership. so that they know that's my expectation. When we hear about it, we get the report, we act on it. We don't sit around for 90 days. We don't just make an arrest and see where we want to go with it. We respond in an appropriate manner at the appropriate time. And then there isn't any, let's do this many cases, let's do that many cases. We're doing what we need to on a workflow. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bob Reese, once again, preventing quota prosecution. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm sorry, Rob, I want to respectfully disagree with part of it. You talked about a successful prosecution, but I like your concept of justice better than successful prosecution. That makes it sound like winning is successful, and what's successful is a just resolution. And that's what's needed in every single case. You get in, you read the report, you talk to key witnesses with experience, you know who the key witnesses are typically. If not, you learn from, you talk to the officers or hopefully you're right about having more investigators, and you find out about that. But you're also time limited. Usually, at least when I was there were a lot more cases, and you have to pick and choose between which are the most serious ones to prosecute and which to spend less time on. And that's one of the reasons I talk about emphasis on violent crimes, because most prosecutors that I know have more cases than they can give the adequate amount of time on. So you have to pick and choose, and you have to select what are the strongest cases and what are the cases that most need following up. And sometimes that's a case where you don't even have a suspect, but it's a serious crime, and you have to, and I've done this, working with the police, we have tracked down the ones that we had to get, and we finally got conviction.
All right, thank you. Finally, with Daniel Aramospi regarding preventing quota prosecution. Your thoughts, sir?
I would agree with both Rob and Bob on aspects of what they've said. There are times where law enforcement makes an arrest, and the next day you show up to the office and you have to look at that arrest and find out what we're charging. This guy's sitting in jail. You have 72 hours to determine the charge. And so you have, based off a probable cause affidavit, you have to largely trust what the officer said and determine whether or not there's a crime there. Now, sometimes there isn't. And recently I had a case where somebody was arrested and for a pretty violent charge, and it was determined that there wasn't a crime there. And the county attorney's office decided not to pursue it, and he was released. But that does happen. The only thing you can do as a prosecutor is your job. You look at it, you judge it by its merits, and you go forward. It doesn't matter what the officer did, because you're the one that has to go forward with it. You're the one that has to go to court with it. And you're the one that has to go to the judge and go to the jury and tell them this is what happened, and you have to be honest about it. If it's not there, you pull back. If it's not there, you do what is there. And so I think if you're prosecuting ethically and if you're prosecuting honestly, then that's the only thing that's important when assessing a case. And that's how I would approach it, and that's how I would ask my staff to approach every one of those cases.
Very good. I'd like to pass the microphone down to Bob Reese. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to close this evening with closing statements by each of our three candidates, and we will begin once again with Bob Reese.
Well, I stated in my opening that I worked 12 years with the Criminal Matter Jury Instruction Committee. I want to point out that that was a non-paying position. I did that out of a sense of public service, and often at my own expense, because most of our meetings were in Casper. I'm approaching this job here in the same way. It's public service. Good public service is its own reward, and this is something I want to do for the county. We've raised 5 children in this county, and Sweetwater County has been very, very good to me and my family, and I want to give back. I'm looking forward to the chance to show my dedication to the task, and I appreciate the interest of so many members of the community to come out here and hear these different issues, and I would appreciate any feedback that you think I need. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Daniel Aramospi, 3 minutes to you.
I agree with Bob. When I read his press statement and he made the comment that public service is its own reward, I thought that, I wish I would have said that. And because it is. I think anybody leaving the private sector and coming into the county attorney's office to a job where there's a lot of work and there is not the pay that's probably out there in the private sector, is that you are doing it because you like the job and you're doing it for some other intrinsic reason, and that's the reason why I'm doing it. This is intrinsic for me. This is something I feel that I owe Sweetwater County, and this is something I feel that I was meant to do. When I was prosecuting, I felt comfortable in that role, and when I left, it was always in the back of my mind that I needed to get back to it. And now's the time that I feel, maybe it's a little bit too late, I don't know, but now's the time that I feel I need to go back into that role and bring what I feel is the integrity, the honesty, and responsible prosecution that the office deserves. My family grew up here, and I'm raising my kids here. And I'd like to have a little say in what goes on in prosecuting crimes in this town and in this county. And I think now is the opportunity I've been waiting for since I graduated law school to get back into it. So I am open to any type of questions. You can hit me up on my Facebook page, the social media that we discussed earlier. You can call me at my office, and I would also like to thank the panel and White Mountain Library for putting this forum on, and great turnout. I couldn't be happier to see so many faces in the crowd. So thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. And finally, closing statements, Rob Hyatt.
Thanks for coming out here tonight and listening to us. I'm sure there are other things that you folks would have rather be doing tonight. This is our opportunity to be able to talk directly to you, the public. I spent some time this last week out at the fair talking with people and addressing their concerns with how things have been going on and about who I am. And I was raised here, and my parents chose to work here when I was a kid. They've passed on now, they're buried here. This is my home. We're all in this together. That's the big thing. Bob alluded to that a little bit, but the people that we're going to be prosecuting are the people that we grew up with. They're the people that could be our next door neighbor. They could be your next door neighbor. Hell, they could be a relative of yours. That's just part of the job. That's not the nice part of the job. It's never nice to have to prosecute a case when you know everyone involved in it. I've had that happen before. It's a terrible position to be in, but that's what you accept when you decide to become a prosecutor or work in the county attorney's office. That's going to happen. Everyone around here almost knows everyone else. I can look around the room and practically go down the road and name names off of people I know or I've worked with that are here tonight. So we are all in this together. This is my opportunity to correct what I see as some shortcomings in a system that has made great changes over the last 10 years. But as we all know, the law's a living thing because we're all living people. The law changes. How we look at things changes. We need to protect what we have here. And I'm willing to work hard in the county attorney's office as your county attorney to make sure that the people of Sweetwater County are treated with respect, that they're safe, and that the cases are prosecuted where the goal is to seek justice and not some political end. And I would ask all the Republicans that supported me before when I ran in 2010 to come out and go to the polls this time and support me once again, and that's what the next 4 years will be like. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to all three of our candidates. I want to thank our panelists as well as those facilitating this.